up front along with Chief John Dougherty. And we typically do this presentation at least once, if not twice, an academic year, focusing on a variety of student topics about dangerous, disruptive, and disturbing with students, but it could certainly be for colleagues, it could be for visitors, it could be for anyone that enters your space. With the recent tragedies that have occurred on a variety of campuses that have been in the news, we decided to focus primarily on the dangerous individual. To give you some tangible skills, some information, some facts about what to look out for in trying to anticipate the situation, and then most importantly, if it should occur in your space, what you can do to help protect yourself, to be able to get out of that space, and then we're going to keep ample time open to answer any of the questions that you might have. So if you came with that burning question, we'll certainly have time to address that. And I apologize for the Internet Explorer. There we go. So just, I'm curious, what worries you? I mean, you carved time out of your day to show up.
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump? I think that he fits some of this criteria. Other thing that worries you as we get started, or I can tell you what worries me is that, being in Alfred, sometimes we let our guard down. It feels like, oh, this is the idyllic spot. Everyone that we accept here as either an employee or as a staff member or as a student, are at peace with one. And so sometimes, that worry about, when I look at what's happening in other parts of the world, am I paying enough attention? Am I really being aware of my surroundings, what's going on? But if you have other worries as we go through this, just jump in. This is pretty informal. That if you have a question as we go, don't feel like you have to wait to the end. But one of the things why we encourage people to show up and to be aware of this is that we want you to get to know who we are. Between John and his staff, Stanley and his staff, and myself, we've got a lot of skill, knowledge, and experience that can help any member of the campus community be safe. We've got the tools right here to be able to do that. And we want to help. We really feel as though that no individual should try to tackle this issue, respond to any type of threat by themselves, to realize that there are multiple stages of support that's available. And that public safety is here, able, willing, trained to respond to a variety of behavioral problems very effectively. I think everyone saw on the news about in the South Carolina high school where the resource officer went into the classroom and dragged that student out. That does not happen here. Okay? That's not how we treat students. That's not how we train our staff to respond to those types of incidents. Okay? I don't want people to get the wrong impression, because our public safety staff especially comes from a culture of caring that reflects the values of the community. And they're partners with us to be able to diffuse those situations. So I don't want any hesitancy on any of our part to use our staff to help respond to these type of situations.
Norm, have you had situations where a faculty member asks a student to leave and the student refuses to leave, so that you are called, or safety is called here?
Actually, there's been a couple incidents. One where we heard from an outside source that a student might be in a pretty vulnerable place, and we needed to intervene to try to get them help. It was at that level, and trying to do so. But we have had, and it's very, very rare, where a faculty member felt as though that two students were very disruptive in the class and weren't responding and was getting in the way of their teaching. the frustration I felt is that the faculty member was reluctant to contact public safety, to use that help in order to, intervene and help the faculty member teach. But it doesn't happen often. We have, by and large, great students, wonderful faculty, have very, very good rapport with students. So it's a very rare exception, fortunately. So some common questions that people have, just so you know, in part of my job is that I've got, there's policy, there's procedures, that if there's someone that we feel is at risk to themselves or somebody else, if they're a threat, there's both defined protocols that we rely on in order to keep that individual safe, but also keep the rest of the community safe. And that if you're involved in that situation, where maybe it be your student worker, maybe it's a student in your classroom, that you're brought into the loop. We rely on trying to understand that student better by talking to you, by having your insight, your understanding. And if it feels like you're out of the loop, that you don't know what's going on, you haven't heard back, let me know, because the intent is not to keep that secret. It's not an intent to keep you away from that knowledge. We want to partner with you, so if you notified us if there was somebody that you felt was engaging in some risky behavior, please let us know, and we work really hard to make sure that you're part of that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. But I also want to, sort of give folks the factual information about what occurs on college campuses, because whenever we watch anything on the media, it gets a little bit, amplified. It gets our attention. It feels like this is occurring all the time. And so looking at the best resource for this, there's a great study, 2009-2010, by the Secret Service, Department of Education, and FBI, to look at targeted violence on college campuses, so that we were able to say, well, how often does this occur? And from 1900 until 2009, 109 years, there were 281 incidents of targeted violence. And that's using the federal definition of assault all the way up to murder for that. So over that period of time, it's relatively rare. And on the left-hand bar, it shows the number of students enrolled in college campuses. As you can see, after World War II into the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it's gone perpetually up, a lot more students there. And at the same time, the number of reported targeted violence incidents have gone up as well. But I need to just give you a caveat. There was some federal legislation called the Campus Crime Act that requires us to produce this lovely booklet each year that all of you received from me, and it filled up your email account, so you weren't able to get any other mail because this is a huge PDF. But it requires us to notify all employees as well as students about the types of crimes that occur on our campus and adjacent property. And so they started gathering those statistics in the mid to late 80s, and that may account for better record keeping so that we can show that spike. But certainly we have many, many more incidents that are occurring. Hi, come on in. That are occurring, and that is of concern as we go along. So we have to respond accordingly and have some good responses to them. But just so you know, again, based upon the government data, 80% do occur on campuses as opposed to being off campus, downtown. But of those, about half are in resident halls, and the other half are in academic buildings for that. So there's a fair distribution. There's typically some precipitating events. Students or the individual just doesn't snap this isn't an impulse action, that there's something that occurs that when they do an assessment that happen, or several things that happen, that it is targeted, that the action isn't just indiscriminate. There's a focus of who that assailant is going to target. There's a pre-incident that occurred in 29%, and that they report this to somebody else. That's not a secret. That in a third of the time or so that they've disclosed this information. So part of what we want to do is to be alert to those signs, symptoms, behaviors, so that we can respond accordingly. Because these plans are not impulse reactions. It's purposeful, it's deliberate, it's planned. That this takes time to implement. So when they're discussing it, when they're talking about, when they're gathering whatever that they need to fulfill this, it is observable, and that you're aware of this. So, these are desperate folks. There's folks that are really at the point of either being suicidal as well as homicidal, but it doesn't happen overnight. This is a continuum of behavior that's occurred. So part of, for us, it allows us to be conscientious, to be aware of when there's an individual in our community that we're concerned about, that's displaying some behavior that Dr. Tam's going to be talking about. It gives us an idea of what to look for, those things that are the cues, and be able to respond effectively, because we want to be proactive. We want to be able to intervene before it escalates to action, and that hopefully we can get that person help, assistance, be able to de-escalate that, and not have acts of violence on our campus. So our guiding principles, our foundation of what we do is we truly believe this is preventable. We believe that if we as a community are conscientious, are aware, are connected with our students or those people that we interact with, that we can intervene effectively. That this violence is a dynamic process. It is not an act of impulse. It's not the spur of the moment. It's a continuum of behavior. It's a function of several factors, that cooperation and collaboration is critical. So if you see something, you feel comfortable enough to call me, Stanley, John, to say, I'm not sure what's going on, but it's caught my attention. It just doesn't feel right. You don't have to have a definitive answer, scenario, diagnosis at all. All you have to do is say, I saw this, and as John will say, the little hairs on the back of my head just stood up, and it just created an uneasy feeling. We'll talk that out with you. We'll try to figure out what's going on. Because the advantage that we have is that we may have other pieces of information about that same individual that others have reported. And we can put those pieces together. And that was one of the critical lessons that we learned from Virginia Tech, is when they did an analysis of that violence, there were literally dozens upon dozens of discrete incidents that were red flags and warning signs that they weren't able to connect the dots and realize that Cho was at risk of so much destruction and violence. So we don't want to be caught that way. We want to be collaborative. And there's a whole continuum that we'll talk about of ways that we can let each other know what's going on. And we're not trying to profile anyone. We're really focusing on the behavior. We're a school that has a wide variety of personalities and attributes and talents and abilities. So we're not wanting to pigeonhole people just because of some preconceived idea. We're really looking at the behavior. Those behaviors that are alarming, concerning, and distressing as we go along. Our cooperation, that we work together, that we feel comfortable in accessing, whether it be counseling services, public safety, my office, that we want to identify early so we can help, so we can be of assistance, and that safety is a primary focus. We want to keep our community safe. One of the things that is a reality when we look at school shootings is that the very first one that is reported occurred in our area. John, was it in Olean? Olean. So it's not, oh, it's someplace far away, big city, metropolitan area. First one occurred literally in our backyard. But most important, the message I hope everyone takes away is that our response is reflective of the values that we have. We care about our students. We care about each other. So if there's one of us that is concerning in behavior and actions, we want to intervene to help them, certainly to stop any targeted violence, but we want to be of assistance. We want to be able to reach out and provide that support, assistance, and help them change as we go along. So Stanley's going to talk a little bit about the dangerous student, things to look for, to be aware of, and then John will talk about some of those tangible, concrete things about what to do when.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about two things. One, I'm going to basically draw out the idea of where I'm coming from, my standpoint, which is primarily prevention. And then John's going to talk a little bit about what that means when crisis is actually happening in the moment. Mostly I'm talking about the scaffolding of the network that we have here, one being Advocate, a built-in system. How many of you use Advocate? Or wouldn't be using the Beacon report. Sorry about that. So Advocate comes to us. That's structurally one of these things that we all do to form the community itself, which is immensely important. I'll read these two definitions, and I'll go through these on prevention. The first one is clear and imminent danger. When a student is actively attempting to hurt her or himself or someone else and is making clear-cut threats to do so. There's two things that are really important here. One is the word active. Active isn't something where it has to be in motion physically. It could be someone where it's just an open gun that you see, that's active. It could also be an email that's an open letter written to you. That's also active when it's a clear-cut plan. And clear-cut in the sense that it's direct, it's not something abstract, it's something that you look at, and 5 other people, if they were to read the same thing, it would be the same assessment. The second thing is potentially dangerous. That is present only in cases related to suicide or threats to others, but also in cases where a student's behavior is so bizarre or unusual as to raise questions about the student's ability to function. I'll talk more about these in the next slide. How many are professors in this room? The beautiful thing about the handful of you that are in this room and the rest of the professors that are here is you are privy to so much information. You're one of the only people and individuals in this university where you get hands-on of 40 to 50 students at a time. And you know everything that they're doing, surprisingly more than they think you know. Whether it's playing with their phones, whether it's their affect being a little bit off, whether it's their relationships going awry. This is something that all of you see, and the beautiful thing with that is that a lot of the professors, a lot of you in here, Lou, have written to me, and that's a direct communication of a prevention, and that's something we want to do. Reading from the top, potentially dangerous. Did I skip one? Yes, sorry about that. Clear and imminent danger. Here are just some examples I'm going to read through, and then I'll draw out a little bit. A student wields a knife and says that he's going to kill himself. This sounds so unlikely, but it's something that the art department, engineering department, there's knives everywhere. So we just have to pay attention to when those would be. A student locks herself in a bathroom after threatening to commit suicide. You would think where, something like the res hall, but there's so many, in Alfred, there's so many of these areas where they're after 4 o'clock, after 6 o'clock, that they're pitch dark and they're bathrooms that are isolated. So that's something that you would just be hands-on or eyes on. A student makes a threat to commit suicide and then flees AU staff who attempt to intervene. This is a bigger consideration because this is all campus where it could affect multiple people and it's not isolated. Something to pay attention to. A student threatens to seriously injure or kill someone else and has a feasible plan to do so. Once again, this would have to be active and clear-cut in you hearing the threat or you experiencing it. And a student is found with empty bottles of medication, and there's reason to believe that the student ingested the medication. In all likelihood, this is most likely going to take place near their residence hall or near their home, so this would be most likely res hall or off campus, but once again, we're not sure. Potentially dangerous. This is more the domain of prevention. A student sends an email message to a professor indicating that life isn't worth living. This email comes much more often than we'd like, and it's sometimes a big issue of that moment contextually. Sometimes it's something from childhood that's getting triggered, and sometimes it's just something pervasive that this student is going through and unable to adjust. This particular email, probably about 5 different professors have emailed me with in this semester alone, so it's happening. It's good for us to be aware of it. It may come in different forms, such as I can't get out of bed, life has no meaning, I'm in a position now where sometimes I feel like I want to hurt myself. These are all emails that the professors and other faculty would receive. In the wake of a breakup of a romantic relationship, a student tells his now ex-girlfriend that he's thinking about killing himself. This is, once again, the reported side, where you're going to hear lovers of partners who are in distress, friends of partners, athletes who are connected to other athletes. This is probably one of the most common occurrences that you might experience, where it could be something that you hear it from someone else, and then our job would be to communicate that and find the source. The next one is, a student confides to a friend that she has fantasies about killing herself and worries that one day she will decide to follow through. Once again, this is enough of a red flag that it would be something that we should directly relate to and reach out to immediately. It would be one of those things that I always think of this situation about, or hearing something like this is the one that often is an emergency call, where we would actually have to actively go out there and check in with the individual, whether it be a counselor or John's team. In the heat of an argument, a student threatens to kill another student but then goes away. This is that assessment piece of you or all of us in this room being able to just have certain training, yes, but there is this human intuition that you just know something's wrong, right? And that's not something that Norm talks about, how we have a certain training. We as humans on this earth interrelating with people have this ability to know when there's some kind of disconnect. And that's something to pay attention to. And the last one is a student sends friends a series of goodbye letters. Once again, when you did suicide training, this is a surefire red flag for us to reach out to the individual. Assessment of all of this gets back to that human intuition, disposition, tone, inferences, the way they move, the way they're carrying their body, their behavior in class, interactions with other people. In regard to all of these situations here with potentially dangerous, this would be stuff to reach out to us with the counseling center, and we would then do one of 2 things. 1, we would reach out via email or call. 2, we'd get in touch with John to do kind of a spot check and have one of them go and check on the individual, or both John and I or someone from our teams, we will go together to the residence hall to check in on that student. So that would be something that would be important. Next slide, John's going to talk a little bit more about the dangerous student. And let's be crazy and put 4 hours. Oh, sorry. Sorry about that. Oh, that mistake. Sorry about that. You okay?
Hello. Thanks for coming. I'm here to talk a little bit about top-notch. Potentially, what do we do when we deal with that dangerous student? First and foremost, call for help. That would be either 911 or the Office of Public Safety at the 2108 number. Either one you call, you will get help. The 911 center is really good. If you call the 911, they'll dispatch police first, and also the Office of Public Safety, one of our officers there. But until we arrive, there's three things that I would like you to do. Listen. Avoid any physical contact that allows the student to talk. Provide a quiet place and an atmosphere to minimize the environmental risk, which get them away from the class. If you have to, let the class go. Anything to try to diffuse the situation. And recognize, know your limits, and clearly convey that to the student. Meaning, if you don't feel that you're trained to do it, don't do it. Don't put yourself into a situation that you feel uncomfortable with. More with dangerous students. Very, very important, protect yourself and that of your coworkers. Never be in the office alone with a student. Have a coworker, have a secretary, have someone available to make that call or to be able to listen in on your conversation, and never ever leave your colleague alone. Never leave the building if they're in a situation like that. And I know we have a lot of people here who work really late. A perfect example maybe of Lou's office. They're working late. Never ever leave Alumni Hall, especially when it's crunch time. You guys are there a lot at night by yourselves. Try not to let anyone be alone, but if you do leave the building, make sure the building's locked. Make sure your office is locked. Make sure you're locking that person in the office. You can raise your hands. Who has an emergency plan in their office already in place? Yeah, I see a few hands. I see a few hands. Please call the public safety office, and I'll be thrilled myself, any of the officers that are working during the day, to come up, sit with you, work on an emergency plan for your office. It's super important, and we'll do things like help you with placement of furniture, in even a code word. I don't want to give any of our code words away, but it would be great to have a code word with your outside assistant or a coworker. If you're in the office with a potential dangerous student, have a code word. Pick up your phone. You're calling something inconspicuous, but something that everybody knows that will trigger a response. Oh, I need to call public safety right away. And please call us right away. I already touched on this. Placement of furniture in your office. So you can't be blocked in if you're talking to someone. And Norm has said it. Stanley has said it. Always pay attention to that intuition. If I had those little hairs on the back of my neck, pay attention to those. It's yourself. It's yourself telling you that, wow, you're not in a good spot here. Who's walking by themselves through your neighborhood, night, dark, and you're going, man, wow, something just isn't right here. It is Halloween coming up, so we'll have a lot of that Saturday. It's better to be safe than sorry. And I'm not going to say this to pick on anyone, but I want to give you an example of something that happened earlier this semester. We get a call from someone who was walking down close to Saxton Drive. She feels that she sees someone with a knife, walking along, carrying a knife. She calls. She did everything perfectly. She called the Office of Public Safety. I contacted Alfred Police to help us. She was very observant. She got a license plate number for that person, but she was really concerned. She felt it was viable. We looked into it probably within 10 minutes. We were able to know it was just a person on campus walking their dog, and they had a tool to help, should I say, clean up? But she did the right thing. She's trying to help. She's working very hard and doing her due diligence on keeping the campus community safe. And that's what I said. She felt so bad. Sorry. They felt so bad for calling, but I would rather be safe than sorry. And again, on-campus emergencies, either 911 or the 2108. Sorry, I keep going back.
Does the 2108 number work 24 hours a day?
Great question. Yes, it does. What happens when we go off duty? We were able to expand our hours a lot, so we have the Office of Public Safety is here more, just with some very, very creative input from the staff. But any of those hours that it's not being manned by someone from Alfred University, that phone is picked up by 911 dispatchers at the 911 center in Belmont. We go through a training. We're getting ready to set a training up with those dispatchers. We try to get them on campus every year to give them a campus tour, show them the new buildings, and that's when we take that opportunity to go over our procedures. They have big 3-ring binders that when something happens after hours, they know our procedures, and they're calling Dr. Tam's staff, myself, usually, or anybody there. So feel confident of calling that number no matter when. Now we're going to get into a little bit more of the serious, dangerous student who is actually what we would consider an active shooter. We have the definition of an active shooter, who is a person who appears to be actively engaging in killing or attempting to kill people in a populated area. In most of these cases, an active shooter uses a firearm, and there is no pattern or method of selection of the victims. Law enforcement is deployed, and we try to stop the shooter before they do any more harm. But one thing I do want to go over is Norm had some good stats from a report he had, but there's a little bit of a newer report out. It's a study on active shooter incidents. This is active shooter incidents from 2000 to 2013. This was conducted by the FBI. And one of the stats that they had in there is, and I wanted to touch base on this, is almost 70% of all active shooter incidents on college campuses are over before law enforcement get there. They're very fast, they're very dynamic, and it's over before you know it. So what we did is the Office of Homeland Security developed the Run, Hide, Fight video. Has anybody in this room seen that video? Very, very good. Who's got the orange folders on their desk? So with that, the Run, Hide, Fight goes almost verbatim. It's a perfect video to go with our shelter-in-place plan. We're going to go over. I thought you set that for 4 hours. We're going to watch the video. It's only about 5 minutes. And we'll go from there. But one thing I did want to, I got some numbers for active shooter incidents. This study went to 2013, and just in 2 years, we've had 53 active shooter incidents in the United States. The numbers are going through the roof, and they're very, very, very concerning. In my, a few of the examples with those shooter incidents where the main one would be is the Colorado incident at the movie theater. Terrible, tragic incidents and a lot of times we really don't know the reason why they do it unless they leave a manifesto or something like that. But we'll watch the video. You said it was safe.
Yeah, never mind. Just can't show it. Yeah, overexposure.
May feel like just another day at the office. But occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you are out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. If you can't get out safely, you need to find a place to hide. Act quickly and quietly. Try to secure your hiding place the best you can. Turn out lights, and if possible, remember to lock doors. Silence your ringer and vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm him. and commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly.
Left, license, get my back.
The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or tend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter.
Rear. Got shots down the hall. Shots down the hall. I got rear.
Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
Pretty powerful video, I would have to say. Any questions on that video? But we can, anybody? We're going to have some questions when Norm's done with the next few slides. If you think of a few, please let me know. Just I want to remind you of your office safety plan. We'd love to help you set one up. And also orange folders if you don't have one, or you may have lost one, or it got accidentally filed in the trash can. I have more here, so please see me afterwards, and I'd be happy to give to you.
You know, some obviously very, very concerning pieces of information, but the main thing we want to let you know is that we're prepared, and John is not a person to brag, but where he just came from earlier this week was an FBI training on the aggressive shooters, specifically for college campuses. You know, we train a lot for this. I've gone to D.C. For specialized training on the behavioral assessment team that I'm going to talk about now. And we're constantly engaged in trying to make sure that our community is safe. Just so you know, a behavioral assessment team meets each week. It's comprised primarily of Director of Counseling Services, Director of Public Safety, myself, Kathy Wolfter as Vice President of Student Affairs, and Tricia DeBerlis as the Assistant Dean for New Students. And we staff each week reports that we hear from a variety of different mechanisms, whether it be through the Beacon reports, public safety reports, residence life reports, phone calls that we get from parents, information that comes to our attention, and just routinely staff those concerns each week. If it feels as though that this is something more than just monitoring and more than outreach of services or having contact or gathering more information, we expand that circle. So we've invited different faculty members, different academic deans, different work study supervisors in to try to get a better understanding of what's going on with the student, the individual, so that we can effectively intervene, provide support services, and respond accordingly. And so if you're concerned about someone, you say, oh, this individual is just acting different. I'm not sure exactly what, but they don't seem like themselves. Don't feel inhibited. Just call, whether it be myself, whether it be Stanley, whether it be John, and talk that out. And we will help try to understand what you're observing. The advantage we have is that we may have gotten 2, 3 other reports about that same individual, and that's a piece that we can put together to get a better global, holistic view of what they're doing. And we have mechanisms in place that if the concern escalates, so can our response. So if it's more than just an outreach, more than a conversation, where it feels like there's more of a threat, we can use policies and practices to require evaluations. If we're concerned about their safety, I can contact their parents and have done so and get their involvement. If need be, we've got good working relationship with law enforcement to use the tools that they have when an evaluation is involuntary. We want to make sure that individual is safe for that. So we've got a lot of those pieces in place that you may not ever see. They're always in the background, and they were always there for us to make sure that our community works well. So our focus is primarily on those students who come to our attention who are suicidal, but it's also the erratic behavior that may include someone that we feel is very violent, that we want to have better understanding about, but also those that are engaged in high-risk behavior too. Those who are transported to the hospital for alcohol poisoning or drug poisoning. Very alarming. You know, sometimes people minimize that and say, oh, it's just college students being college students. No, we take that extremely seriously and say, you know, this is an indication of engaging in concerning behavior, and we're not just going to minimize it. We're going to look at it deeper, and we rely on that to make sure that everyone in the community is safe with that. So that's what we do, and we want to provide that information for you. But we also want to make sure that we answer any questions that you have about how you should access us, how you could keep safe. Those things are a concern. Questions for Stanley, John, and myself? Or observations that you have?
What about students who are not currently active on campus?
Okay.
They're on a medical leave and they call you and threat.
And they call with a threat?
Yeah.
Let us know. For example, if you're the recipient of that call and you know that there's some affiliation that they have with the university, certainly call me, call John with that. But let's say it's someone that has graduated, who's no longer affiliated with matriculating at school. We can also use mechanisms to bar them from campus. We can issue a persona non grata, meaning that if they show up on campus, they'll be arrested for trespassing. Because any of us, should not be in an environment where we're threatened by somebody else. That's inconsistent with community values. So I issued that letter barring them from campus, and that letter stays into effect until there's some resolution. You know, either they come in and meet with me, we find out what's going on, or we just keep it in place for them. And we have utilized that. But if it's someone on leave, that would be a determining factor about if we're going to allow them to come back from leave. Lou?
If there's an active shooter on campus, how does the notification system work? How long does that take?
John?
Great question, which kind of segues and leads me into, is everyone signed up for Rave Alert?
When I signed up and I still don't get the things, and I talked to Lena about it,
Mhm.
and she said that it reactivates every Friday, and so I never received.
You still haven't?
No.
Okay, to answer your question, we'll deal with that.
Yeah.
To answer your question, as soon as we would get the notification, units would respond, and one of us from communications, from student affairs, would send you the Rave Alert that uses your cell phones, text message, emails, and also when you sign up, it's a mass calling. What we would do if there was a mass shooter, we would ask for shelter in place, and then we would try to update the campus community with as much detail as soon as possible to try to give them more information, because I personally feel a well-informed community member is better to have than people that are questioning and getting that rumor mill going. But that is our first and foremost.
So John, when you get the notification that requires that to go out, literally how long does it take you to do that?
I can pick up my phone and I can have you a message in 3 clicks.
Yeah.
We have templates made for that situation. We just put building, time, and date, and it's out. We've run some tests. It's a brand new system for us, and that just started in September. We've run tests. We've even sent out a few messages with it. And honestly, if you don't have it, go to our Alfred, go to your banner information, and it's listed right there. And if there is a problem, please let me know because we thought we had them all worked out. You go in and update your information. It updates at 12:01 every night. So it's up, and you can put, I think, up to 4 cell phone numbers with it. So if you have family that you want to be notified, it has 2 emails, and it has, I think, up to 5 normal landlines that it will call and notify those landlines of information.
Is there any reason why the siren isn't used?
Yes, there is a reason because there's really no way to separate it from a fire emergency or a personal emergency. We've tested the Alfred Stanley. Familiar with the Alfred State siren? We've tested a few times with them, and it just isn't loud enough, and it really doesn't get attention of especially the students and the staff that are outside.
So the siren that's on campus can't be pulsated, or can't be
Nope.
altered?
Nope, because we looked into it. We've looked into a mass device like that over the last few years, and no, that's like a 1948 siren, and it's all mechanical, and there's no way to manipulate that sound.
Other questions? Steve?
So if you were signed up for emergency notifications last year, that system is gone?
It's been replaced. You shouldn't have to do anything.
Oh, it got moved over?
Yeah. There's a bridge between the old E2 campus and this new product that is more robust. There's a lot more, pardon the pun, bells and whistles on it, and personal safety devices that we all can use, but that we also wanted students to use as far as, because everyone has a smartphone, and there's ways that they can have a friend, family member track them via GPS of when they leave. Let's say they're studying late in your late night study place, and they live up in Norwood, and they're kind of scared walking alone back up there. There's literally a way that someone can monitor their progression back to the hall, but also alert public safety if they don't get there by a certain time. It's pretty robust.
And that is the Rave Guardian option of that. That's a smartphone app that you can just go to your Play Store, whether it be Google or Apple, and sign up for that. I beg you, I wish you would, because it is a great tool we have. Norm, described it as the virtual escort options on that, but there's so much more. There's panic buttons, and you can report emergencies. You can report bullying. You can report anything. There's about 22 different categories there that you can report, and if you see something, you can send us a picture with that app directly. And when that happens, we get an alarm at the office. We respond to that. We have the picture available right away. It really is a great option, and you're going to see the campus get inundated here this month with some more marketing information. So with your classes, students, coworkers, please help us spread the word that it's a great option to have.
And do you want to just update folks about the cameras on campus too?
Yeah, we have a number of cameras on campus now. Resident halls, all together, we'll have, as soon as the museum is up and running, we'll have 105 cameras on campus, and they have become a great tool. In my opinion, they've become a great deterrent for people. It's kept the honest people honest, but also it's assisted in some arrests with some pretty major crimes that you probably heard about. The vandalism, we were actually able to use the camera system to help us with those arrests, which never would have been possible if we didn't have them. Another example is we had some stolen credit cards. We were able to, the person withdrew some money out of the person's account using the ATM downstairs, and we actually tracked that person using our cameras all the way back to their resident home, and made a positive ID when they walked in the back door of their home. And again, that never would have happened if we didn't have the cameras.
Do students know that we have that many cameras?
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I think, I'll just say for myself, of being a certain age, the idea of cameras and all these safety devices seems very unsettling and uncomfortable, but our students come from a culture of safety that almost all of them have resource officers in their school. Almost all of them go through some sort of metal detectors when they go through the front doors of their school. Almost all of them have cameras wherever they go. And one of the more common occurrences when they'll be parking in a parking lot and something will happen and the car will get damaged. And John, what's the first thing they ask?
Can you view the cameras to see what went on? But just to add to that, we've had a few professors actually bring their class into the office so they can view the system and really get some hands-on and really get some one-on-one information with me. And it's worked really well. I think, people love to be informed and they love to see what we're doing. And I think the biggest thing of what I like about that happening is they can see that we're not doing it to be intrusive. We're using it to be very proactive, and then we use it. But it's just a great option for us.
Any other questions? Thank you for your time. We'll be sticking around here. If you're interested in the slides, just shoot me an email and I'll send those to you. Most likely what we're going to do is, since this is videotape, put the slides and the video online, and I'll post on Alfred Today about the link for that so people can get that, and you can share it with your coworkers that may not have been able to make it today. But enjoy the day. Enjoy Halloween.
Thank you. In that video, the pipe bomb, someone was holding a fire extinguisher. They were holding it that they could.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? Good.
Is that more effective than spraying a person with a fire extinguisher?
Our situation is nothing like what was discussed today. This is the first year we've encountered a handful of students that come into the office and they're verbally distressed.
I think
And they take
it
that
was
out
just
on us.
showing to adapt.
And we
But I just
don't
wondered
really
when I
have the
saw that
coping skills to deal with it.
pipe and
So it's disturbing that we're getting that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
But they're not, it's not like they're going back to do anything bad. It just, at that moment in time, they're really quite agitated.
Yeah.
They're not turning it into anything, significant or adverse, because I've hit one student that was working with a colleague that he was a student, was just becoming very, very agitated and spoke disrespectfully and just says, you're not doing anything for me. An hour later, he comes back in the office and hands me something. Everything's fine.
Well, and my wife used to work in financial aid, and it's volatile when you're talking about people's income and their ability to continue their education, and there's a lot of passion. Two things we can do. One is to have Stanley's team come in and work about how to manage
Well,
that.
I've got that on my list.
Okay. The other thing is that we can hold that student accountable for that behavior if you feel like that's appropriate. You can just shoot me an email, let me know that, or if you go to My Alfred, on the left-hand side it says AU reported. Just click on that. It's an incident report that you fill out, and when you hit submit, it comes to me. And what that does is it prompts a conversation. Meet with the student and really challenge them, saying, is this really how you want to be seen? Is this how you want to interact with people?
And most
Well, and so it creates an opportunity that if you let me know about, even if you don't want to do anything official, you would say, I don't want to have it to be where they're charged with violation of code of conduct. It lets me know, give the heads up to the football coach, and say, we need to work because your team is being portrayed in a way that you don't want it to be. Yeah, they do. And they want things immediate, and they want things their way, and they don't have education. But part of our responsibility as educators is to say, as you emerge into your adulthood, you need to acquire some skills. And if you do this on the job, you're going to get fired.
Well, that's just it. They have to be accountable for what we're presenting to them because they are the student record and everything is under their name.
Yeah.
And they just keep, shunning it.
Yeah. And so part of what we try to do is, how to respond, react, behave appropriately.
Of course, our other scenario is, do we report it to the supervisor? Let them manage it?
Well, in your office?
Well,
I feel if someone steps on your foot, it's okay to say ouch.
well, that's okay. So it's okay to report it to...
It's okay with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good idea to figure this out. All of the time I've said, well, we've been experiencing this in our department.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, it's been more when we get the boarders, so their distraughtness is more emotional, which is one of the things that we hate when we're working with people and we're a little too open, and it's like going, I feel bad because you want to give them some privacy. But lately, within the last year, it's been the aggressive side of it that's coming into play more than just overly emotional and going to have a breakdown. And that shift in focus where it's not that you necessarily feel that you're being attacked, but it's the aggressive, you can feel the aggression coming.
As John says, those little hairs.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've had that too, and just as we're saying, the dynamics in our office, the way that it's set up, we have so much confidential information. We had an incident last Friday, and I wasn't there. During the lunch hour, some students walked behind the employee, and she said her hairs were standing
Oh,
on
yeah,
end.
yeah.
And we don't typically
Well,
have that.
and in that
type
one,
of
you've
contact.
seen me, excuse me,
Yeah.
and I do that. And again, my lower voice and my downstage, excuse me, and it's this.
Well, and that's one of the things also inviting John about, the physical space.
Yeah.
He don't want to say it there, but like in my office, the code word is that, because I see upset students all the time. And so ours is that if I call out and ask if they bring in a cup of coffee, they know to call the police, because I would never call a man for a cup of coffee.
It will make me pass out.
Well,
I was joking about snickerdoodles.
Well, but we're trying to think of a scenario that would fit and be reasonable,
Right.
Yeah.
and so that you know.
Yeah.
And we haven't gotten that far with just the changes that we've seen so far. What should
And
we be
really just
prepared
in
for?
this academic year, it's just been, there's been a definite change in just response to when you tell them, yeah, I see that you're doing this, but we need this, and then it's like going, okay.
Well, so we can be proactive.
Yeah.
If you let us know the coach or the players like that, we can inform the coach. We can intervene that way. We can do it one-on-one. We certainly can do some things in your office about some skill sets and how to
And it
respond.
may be even within our office, just having somebody else there. A lot of times, I'm usually there, but there are times that I'm not. And this is usually on the lunch hour where we just have one staff member that's on duty.
Well, also, if you know that there's an individual, whether it be the student or their parents, that are of concern, it's always okay to call John and say, can you just be in the vicinity? We do that all the time. There'll be a faculty member that has to let a student know that they're being charged with plagiarism and dismissed from school or something like that. John just discreetly is out of sight, is aware of that, and we can certainly do that.
And we don't always know when that can
No,
happen.
but if it's scheduled like, Mr. So-and-so's coming, and, because of this and how they were on the phone.
Might need a little support.
Yeah, and so don't hesitate, because you've got a hard enough job as it is, you don't want